Welcome to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. You're tuned into the second hour of the sunrise, and don't worry because I'll be here to keep you company all the way until 9 a.m. Okay, and don't worry because I still have a lot of interesting and fun content for you. So just make sure you stay tuned all the way until 9 a.m. because after this we will be talking about much more interesting things as well. And the conversation here is always positive. It's always about making you feel better. It's about having a lot of positivity. It's about tips on how to feel good about yourself, and not just yourself. You can also spread and help, or give these tips rather to your friends and your family and help them feel better as well. So don't forget to do that because here at Relax it's always about positivity, right? Relax Radio is all positives and no negatives, and that's what we preach, and that's what we want to make sure you have and feel as well. So we're very excited that you're here because I have a lot of interesting conversation to share with you. But also, before we actually head into our conversation, I want to very quickly remind you that you can, in fact, be a part of the show. All you need to do is just text me on 078 or you can even call me on that exact same number. Get in touch with me, share your thoughts, share your opinions. I want to know what you're saying. I want to hear what you're saying as well. So make sure you do that. And actually, don't forget to go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So, that way when you follow us on our socials, you can always stay updated. You can always stay informed about everything that happens all over the world. Okay, so don't forget to do that. If you're someone who loves to be informed, if you're someone who loves to be updated, well, Relax Radio is the place for you, right? Because we always make sure you're informed about everything. We talk about everything from science to sports to health to technology and entertainment, gossip, whatever it is that you're interested in. We talk about everything. Okay, so make sure you go follow us, share our post with everyone, share it amongst your friends, because that way it'll definitely help you to make sure that other people see you as someone who's always informed about everything that is happening in the world. Okay, and something else that you can do to stay informed is actually to go download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Make sure you download the app. Make sure you share your thoughts, your opinions with us on our app as well. You can directly get in touch with us. Just go on over to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Just type Relax Radio on the search bar, and you can actually find our app. Okay, so don't forget to do that because that's definitely going to help you, be informed and be involved in this conversation as well. So right now we're going to be talking about how the fashion industry can in fact be exploitative, right? And to actually tell you more about this story, I will be telling you about Halima Aden, who actually quit the fashion industry because of how exploitative it was for her. Okay, so let's talk about her story. If you can relate to this as well, or if you know people who have quit the fashion industry because of how exploitative it is and how things haven't really worked out for them, make sure you text me and make sure you let me know because I would absolutely love to find out as well. Okay, so let's actually get directly into the conversation now. Halima Aden was actually age 19 when she became the first contestant in the Miss USA 2016 beauty pageant to wear a hijab and burkini, right? And this actually attracted the attention of French fashion legend Karine Roitfield. And basically, she was the first hijabi wearing woman to actually walk the runway, right? And this was obviously huge in terms of representation, in terms of diversity, because this was the first time it was happening, right? And this was way back in 2016. And the following year, she actually became the first hijab wearing model to sign with a global modeling agency. She signed with IMG, and then she was also the first to walk at a New York Fashion Week for Yeezy, which is the Kanye West brand, right? And we know about Kanye West and his brand. So she actually was one of the first models to actually walk. She was the first to actually walk for the New York Fashion Week for Yeezy, right? And she also later became the first hijab wearing model to make the cover of Vogue. And in fact, it wasn't just one Vogue, it was two Vogues, because it was first Vogue Arabia and then it was British Vogue. And she soon became a Sports Illustrated swimsuit. She was in that magazine as well. So she modeled for the Sports Illustrated swimsuit shoot as well. Okay, and at that point in her career, at that point in her in her experience in the industry, she'd already become a UNICEF ambassador, right? And she was a go-to voice on diversity in the fashion industry, and it was monumental for someone from the Muslim community to be representing other Muslim women, especially because something that she told, something that she said she felt was that when it comes to Muslim representation in the fashion industry, that doesn't really exist, right? And when she was modeling, she felt like she was finally representing her sisters. She was finally paving the way for her sisters to actually not obviously for them to get into the modeling industry, to the fashion industry. And she said that it actually really helped help pave the way for all these young girls out there, and to also tell them, look, your dream is achievable, it's not impossible, you just have to work hard for it, right? So like I said, she was in fact the first hijab wearing model to actually be in any fashion industry, in any fashion campaign. So in 2017, she actually gave the first TED talk at a refugee camp in Kakuma, Kenya. Okay, and Teen Vogue also went with her because obviously she was influential. She was changing the lives of so many young girls out there. And she was also changing this narrative that existed, that what, if you're from a minority, if you're from an ethnic or religious minority, that you have no place in fashion. So she was obviously changing that narrative as well, and that was monumental for someone, especially because it took you all the way till 2016 to actually have that sort of representation, to actually have that sort of diversity, right? So it was huge, and this was something that she was very proud of as well. Now, to actually take a look back into her childhood and how exactly she grew up and whatnot. Aiden was actually born a refugee in the United Nations Kakuma camp in northwestern Kenya, right? And how this basically happened was her mother had fled there during the Somali civil war in 1994. And there, their house was actually made of mud, scraps, and sticks, and basically anything her mother could find. And sometimes she said that it would be very normal for her to go to nursery school, come back, and find that her house had been washed away. She says, right? And that's what she said. And if you actually look at a story, if you look at a lot of the other stories of refugees, their lives are actually really sad. They've had to go through a lot of struggle. They've had to go through so much of pain and suffering and even sacrifice to be where they are right now. So like she said, but sometimes when she came back after nursery, because of the rain, the house would have washed off. And when she saw that, what she said was, it didn't actually make her sad or something. It didn't make her feel bad, because at that point the community would in fact come together to rebuild it. And then it's the kids' time to play around, right? So when things like this happen, the whole community would come together to help each other. And I think one of the most beautiful lessons you can learn from refugee camps, one of the most beautiful things that you see in refugee camps, is in fact how communities come together and help each other during these tough times, right? And that is what Halima Aiden's story was as well, right? And when she thinks of her childhood, when she thinks of how she grew up and whatnot, she remembers her childhood in the camp as being joyful and supportive, right? And if you lived in that sort of community where everyone helped each other, where everyone was supportive of each other, then obviously, in your experience of your childhood, in the experience of growing up, you would feel joyful and supportive, right? And that's what she felt as well. Now her present life is, she's where she is right now, and she is creating a lot of, she's paving the way for a lot of other young Muslim girls to actually be a part of the fashion industry, right? The fact that she has been able to have a global career in fashion at all is in fact proof that the industry is increasingly open to diversity, right? However, having said that the industry is open to diversity, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no exploitation that happens simply because the industry is diverse, right? And we were talking about the modeling industry yesterday as well, in terms of Lena Bloom, who happens to be the first trans cover star, and how that was monumental in terms of the trans community. So like I said, just because there is diversity, just because there's inclusivity, it doesn't necessarily mean that the fashion industry has completely eliminated its exploitation and how exploitative it actually is. Now Aiden is actually 5 feet and 5 inches, and she's quite petite for a model, and is also a resident of Minnesota, which is far from the industry capitals of New York, London, Paris, or even Milan, right? And she said that the fact that she's able to do a runaway, that she has graced all these magazine covers, and she can wear a hijab on top of that, and actually be who she is and have her identity and wear it proudly. She thinks that fashion is doing a beautiful job with all of that, right? Obviously, for you to have that sort of representation, for you to actually you know, be able to talk to people and let people know and represent your community like that in the fashion industry, and still be yourself, be who you are, wear your identity proudly, means a lot to her, right? Obviously, because if you think about it, I mean, look, we've all seen how the Muslim community has been marginalized a lot, right? I mean, obviously, because of Islamophobia, because of the way they're treated and all of that, it is in fact very monumental. It is in fact something that she is very proud of, that she can represent her community especially in the fashion industry, and have a global career that actually lets her, wear her identity, support, that supports her identity and lets her tell her story through her identity, which is, quite a huge job in terms of the fashion industry as well, right? So she said that she thinks fashion is doing a beautiful job in terms of representation, in terms of letting people wear their identities and letting people truly be who they are, right? And obviously, it's 2021. We're talking about a diversity, we're talking about inclusivity, and we can all agree that she has in fact paved the way for a lot of young Muslim girls out there to finally follow their dreams, for them to actually, tell themselves that it's not unachievable and it's not impossible. Because growing up, when you look at all these fashion magazines, I mean, it's pretty obvious that those girls would never have seen any representation, because if Halima Aden was the first woman to wear a hijab in the runway, especially in the modeling industry, that took until it was 2016, right? So until then, you never actually saw representation for Muslim girls. Now, right now, Aden actually has a 47-piece hijab collection, which is called Halima into Mona Lisa, Halima plus Mona Lisa, and her hijab is stipulated as non-negotiable in her contract with IMG, right? Which is again another good thing, because this is her identity, and it's in a contract that says, in her contract itself, it says, look, no matter whatever the instance is, the hijab is non-negotiable, that she will always wear it, which is in fact a beautiful way to go about it, right? Now make sure you stay tuned, because we still have a lot left to discuss on this. But until then, we're actually going to head into a small break, and I will be back to keep talking to you about this topic. Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now you're tuned into the second hour of the sunrise, and I will in fact be here to keep you company all the way until 9 a.m. So make sure you stay tuned, because we're having a very interesting conversation about how, even though though the fashion industry can have a lot of, representation, can have a lot of inclusivity, it doesn't always mean that the fashion industry is in fact, not exploitative, right? Because despite all of the inclusivity, all of the representation that actually exists, the fashion industry can actually be quite exploitative. Now that is what we're talking about, and we're talking about Halima Aden and why, she herself told that the fashion industry can be exploitative. So if you want to find out more, make sure you stay tuned, because we're having a very interesting and important conversation about fashion, about the fashion industry. And hopefully, if you're really interested in some of the stuff that we talk about, you can in fact go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So go follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and go actually, go like us on our Facebook page, because that way you can actually stay tuned and you can share your thoughts. You can, engage with us. You can always be informed about everything that happens. So make sure you stay tuned, okay? And don't forget to actually go download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store as well, because that way, you can always make sure that you can join into the conversation from anywhere in the world at any time of the day. So don't forget to do that, because it's going to be absolutely amazing if you can actually stay tuned to the conversation. You can share your thoughts and your opinion with us, because here at Relax Radio, we care about you, we care about your opinion, we care about what you have to say. So don't forget to do that. But right now, let's actually head back into the story of Halima Aden and what she exactly has to say about this, right? So, to actually get back into our conversation, she says that the hijab is, in fact, a huge part of her identity, right? And she says it's not because I don't think people are going to listen, it's more so they know what to expect, right? And that's the reasoning behind as to why she wears a hijab. It's not necessarily because of, it's not necessarily because people are going to listen, but instead it's a way of saying, look, this is what you have to expect. I am a hijab wearing model, and you have to respect that and expect that as well, right? So what she does when she goes for her shoots and whatnot is that she always brings extras, right? So her own set of turbans, turtlenecks, tights, because it's a collaboration. And she also recognizes that for a lot of people in her first year especially, she was the only hijab wearing girl that they had worked with, right? So it was very, it was very new to them, and they didn't necessarily know what to expect as well. So 100%, they weren't 100% aware, or they didn't know about what to expect. So what she did was to make it easier for her and for them as well. She'd take, extra turtlenecks, tights, turbans, and whatnot. So in case, an issue was there, in case something happened, she would always have, a backup. She would always have a hijab to wear, and she would always, she would have had herself covered. In case, people didn't know what exactly to do, and people weren't exactly sure what they had to do, right? Now, what we need to keep in mind, or what you need to understand, is obviously, her being a hijab wearing model and whatnot, in her contract, and when she was, signing up with all of these other brands and whatnot, she actually had a few conditions. She actually had a few requirements, which they basically had to fulfill, right? And obviously, if it wasn't fulfilled and whatnot, she didn't necessarily always do the runway with them, right? So some of these conditions that she actually had was, she in fact asked for, she had certain requirements, such as a pop-up tent in which she could change backstage at shows, right? And she says that even though she's asked for these things, she has never uncomfortably been othered, right? She has never been made to feel like she's someone else, or like she's special and she needs some sort of extra requirement, right? She said that she's never been made to feel that way, right? Now, for example, one of her biggest moments that she clearly remembers is when she was is her experience for walking for Yeezy, right, which was basically at the New York Fashion Week in 2017. And that was her breakout year, and was a watershed moment for her as well. So the first outfit she was presented with was absolutely not going to work, right? Because she said that, it was above her knee, and that was way too short. And she said even then that she knew that walking away when something doesn't fit is always better than feeling you need to force something, right? And I think this is a problem that we all struggle with ourselves as well, because sometimes, we want to say no, but also at the same time, you don't want to say no, so you're constantly struggling. You don't know what sort of decision to make. Sometimes, even though, you're like, because you're so unsure and you're indecisive about what decision you have to make. Sometimes being asked to do whatever it is that you don't want to do, but you're not quite sure about it, might make you feel forced, right? And she said that that feeling of walking away was so much better than, in fact, feeling like she had been forced to do something. So she walked away because the dress was too short, she wasn't gonna wear that. And when she returned to the hotel, obviously she was quite upset, and she was disappointed, but she was still resolute, right? And then even without having to say anything, without having to like speak about it or whatever, they had called her back and said, we have a second option, we have something else that maybe you might be okay with. And then she went back and she tried it on and she said it was perfect, right? And she knew it was a pivotal moment in her life, right? Because the people who you want to work with, they're willing to work with you just the way you are. So that's what she said, and that's what her experience about the whole industry was as well. And I think that's important as well, because especially if you're the first hijab wearing model, and people need to respect the fact that you have made certain choices, they need to respect them and be okay with it, right? And that was the same for her as well. They respected her decisions, they respected her choices, and they actually said, look, if you don't want to wear it, well, okay, that's your choice, that's your option, and we're not going to make you feel bad about it, right? And even though she was disappointed, she was still resolute because she knew she had done the right thing, and she didn't feel like she was being forced into doing something she didn't want to do. She didn't feel like she had to change for someone else, and that's very important, right? Because especially when you work in the fashion industry, when you work in an industry that expects a lot from especially in fashion, you have to change a lot, right? You have to do things, change your style, change certain things about yourself to basically make sure that it appeals to whoever it is that is shooting you, or that it appeals to whoever you're representing, right? For example, if you're walking on a runway, then you have to change these things about yourself, your hair, or whatever it is you're wearing, because you're working for them, right? So in a place like the fashion industry, where you are consistently asked to change a few things about yourself, where you're not necessarily given the freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do, it's very, very important it was very important for Halima Aden that she was allowed to do what she was allowed to do what she wanted to do, right? And especially respecting the fact that she didn't that she wore a hijab and that she didn't want to wear show clothes, or rather she didn't want to wear short clothes, does in fact show a lot about how the fashion industry has evolved, right? And obviously, we need to commend the fashion industry on the fact that they have evolved, on the fact that they are in fact more inclusive, they have a lot more representation than they used to. However, having said that, that doesn't necessarily mean that the fashion industry is in fact not exploitative, right? Because as we progress in this story later on, you'll eventually find out that the fashion industry can in fact be very, very exploitative sometimes, right? So it's important for us to keep that in mind as well. But however, it is definitely something positive, it's definitely something good in terms of Halima Aden, because she was able to pave the way for a lot of young Muslim girls out there, and make sure that they had a future, make sure that they understood that their dreams are in fact something that they can achieve. It's not impossible, just because you wear a hijab, that doesn't mean that you don't have any space in the fashion industry, because she herself created that path, right? And I think it's absolutely amazing what she's doing with herself, what she's doing with the job, and how exactly she has created a lot of impact, right? Because she was the first hijab model to actually be on two of the Vogue covers, which included obviously Vogue Arabia and British Vogue, and that is monumental, right? Because it's Vogue, right? Everyone wants to be on Vogue, and Vogue is one of the biggest fashion magazines out there. So the fact that she got to represent her community, and the fact that she got to represent her identity and who she truly is on such a huge fashion platform, and especially in such a huge industry, and that she still made a global career out of it, just goes to show that if you keep trying, that it's not hard, that you're eventually going to get there. Not that it isn't hard, I mean obviously it is, but that if you keep trying, you will eventually be able to achieve your dreams, right? Don't ever give up on your dreams because of these restrictions that might have been placed, because eventually if you keep fighting, if you keep representing yourself in the way you want to be represented, then eventually they will have to make space for you, right? Which is, one of the most important takeaways from Halima's list, or from Halima's experience, right? And she said she was, very, very glad to be opening up this whole avenue for these young girls to be able to come to terms with what they like to do and to achieve their dreams. Now, obviously, when she does things like that, it's not without backlash, right? There is in fact going to be a lot of backlash from her community as well. And we will be talking about all of that. If you have any thoughts that you want to share with me, make sure you do that. Make sure you text me on 07852473473, because I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what your thoughts are, and I want you to let me know what you feel about this, right? Do you feel that even though the fashion industry has diversity, even though it has representation, even though it has inclusivity, that it is still exploitative, right? Let me know what your thoughts are, because I would absolutely love to hear it. And because this conversation is between all of us, let me know what your thoughts are, because here at Relax Radio, we focus on you. We want to know what you're saying. We want to hear what you're saying as well. So don't forget to do that, right? Now, Halima Aden, who is actually the Muslim model who, in fact, became a trailblazer for wearing the hijab on the catwalk and in photo shoots, has basically hit out of the fashion industry, right? And the reason she hit out of the fashion industry, this was last year in November 2020, was because it's exploitation of young models, right? Now, make sure you stay tuned, because we will be getting into all of that. And I know, obviously we were talking about her early experience, right? How she said that she was so happy because of the representation that they got. She was very happy because of how she could be represented and all of that. And she said that in terms of fashion, in terms of moving forward, in terms of diversity and inclusivity, the fashion industry was doing a beautiful job because of them, basically making sure that there was a place for a hijab wearing model, right? However, despite all of that, there is still, exploitation that happens, and that has been one of the main reasons as to why she quit the industry. So make sure you stay tuned, because if you want to find out more, you have to stay tuned. But right now, we're gonna head into a small break, and after that, we will be back to keep talking to you about this topic. So make sure you stay tuned.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts mainly because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. That's very important, right? Because you want cars,
very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on air, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you've got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million pounds. And they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. Now we're having a very interesting and important conversation about, how the fashion industry, even though it is diverse and it has a lot of representation and inclusivity, even though all of those things exist, that it's actually very, very exploitative, right? Because we're talking about the story of Halima Aden and how she basically quit the fashion industry last November because of how exploitative it was, especially in terms of young girls. So that's a conversation we're having. You're tuned into Relax Radio, and we're in fact having a very, very important conversation right now. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned because we're going to be continuing this conversation. We still have a lot more left to discuss about this. But also, I would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions regarding this. Okay, so let me know because all you need to do is actually just text me on 07852473473 because I want to know, I want to know your thoughts. I want you to share your opinions with us because obviously, it's important that I feel and I understand what you're thinking as well, right? Because Relax Radio is always about you. It's about what you think. It's about what you want to hear, and it's about the decisions that you make. Okay, so make sure you text me. Make sure you let me know what you're feeling, what you're thinking, because I absolutely, obviously, want to hear what you have to say. And also, don't forget to go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Make sure to go, like us on our Facebook page and follow us on the rest of these other apps because, there's so many. And that's, because we use all of these apps, you can actually make sure that you're tuned. You can actually make sure that you can actually make sure that you're informed and updated about everything that happens, not just here in the United Kingdom, but in fact all over the world as well. So don't forget to do that. Don't forget to actually go follow us on our socials. And another thing that I quickly need to remind you before we head back into the conversation is not to forget to download our app, rather, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Okay, don't forget to download our app. No, don't forget to go download the app so you can share the conversation, you can listen to the conversation, and you can join the conversation from anywhere in the world. So don't forget to do that. But right now, let's actually head back into our topic, which is basically about how the fashion industry can be exploitative, right? So, getting back into our conversation, earlier we were just talking about how Halima Aden was in fact the first Muslim model who became a trailblazer, rather, for wearing her hijab on the catwalk, and how she in fact had a monumental impact in terms of creating a lot of in creating, or rather in paving the way for a lot of young Muslim girls to actually become models, right? And how she made it possible for these girls to achieve her dream. And she was doing a huge, or and her contribution in terms of the fashion industry for Muslim models was in fact monumental, right? So that's what we were talking about. Now, like I said, she actually quit the industry in November 2020, and she cited compromised beliefs and feeling like a minority within a minority for actually quitting the industry. So, in a new interview for the BBC World Service with Tommy Hilfiger, Aiden actually says that towards the end of her modeling career, she felt like she had lost control of her identity, right? Because the last 2 years she trusted the team on set to do her hijab, and that's when she started running into problems. She said, jeans were being placed on her head in place of the regular scarf, right? And the way they styled the hijab was actually made her very far removed from her own image. And with each shoot, the hijab in fact kept shrinking and got smaller and smaller. So for her, she felt like she was losing her identity little by little, right? Because come on, if you are using a regular scarf for your hijab, and then especially in the fashion industry, with the whole guise of fashion, you keep using other things to do her hijab, and the size of the hijab keeps getting smaller and smaller, then that also means that in a way she's actually losing her identity. She's losing a little bit by bit of her identity. Now, in 2016, Aiden was in fact the first Muslim, or rather the first fully covered Muslim contestant to compete in the Miss Minnesota USA contest, right? And like I said, she later signed with the IMG Models. And when she started, she actually thought, this is going to open the door for so many girls in my community, right? Which is true, right? And in a way, she did open doors for so many girls in her community. She paved the way for so many girls in her community, because this eventually, pave the way for them to be able to realize their dream, for them to achieve their dream, and for them to realize that dreams are not impossible, that dreams are in fact achievable, right? So and she said that when she was small, she never got to flip through a magazine and see someone in a hijab. So to be that person for other girls was in fact a dream come true. And the last 2 years of her career, she has so much internal conflict, right? Now, in 2019, Aiden actually made history by becoming the first model to wear a burkini. And that was designed by Tommy Hilfiger in the Sports Illustrated magazine. So she was in fact the first model to finally wear a burkini, and it was all the way back in 2019, right? Which was 2 years back. So obviously, it was very, very important for her to actually for her to be able to reclaim her identity, for her to be able to actually talk about her identity, to explore her identity, especially in a career, in an industry where it's always about creating so many other identities, right? Like I said, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to the things that you share, the kind of selves that you portray, because we're talking about fashion ultimately, right? And that means you have to take on this whole new person and become this whole new personality to actually embody whatever it is that you're wearing, right? You have to embody the designer, you have to embody the design. So in a sense like that, in an industry like that, obviously there are a lot of changes that you have to make. And let's say exact same change that she had to make as well, except she was allowed to wear her hijab, and she was sort of allowed to keep her identity, right? Which in a way is in fact something, or which in fact can be considered as a big win for someone like her, who comes from a community community, that has very specific views regarding modeling, regarding fashion, right? And obviously it's important for us to discuss what exactly the views of her community was, right? What exactly her community thought when she was modeling, right? So we will be talking about all of that. But to actually head back before I actually head back into the conversation, I want to very quickly remind you that you can in fact get in touch with us. Okay, all you need to do is just text me on 07852473473. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what your thoughts are, and actually share your thoughts about this as well. What you think about the fashion industry, what you think about Halima's decision, and whether you think she did the right thing, right? Because obviously I think she did the right thing, especially if she felt like she was losing her identity, and she was, basically her whole contract basically made the hijab non-negotiable, right? And in a sense, when you have a contract like that, you have to make sure you stick to that, right? If you're going to keep reducing the size of the hijab, then that's definitely not going to help. And the fact of the matter is, the more smaller the hijab, the more she felt like she was losing her identity bit by bit. So if that was the case, and if that was what she was feeling, it's important for us to discuss that sometimes the fashion industry, although it seems to be, all good, and it finally seems to be liberal and having a lot of inclusivity and representation, it might not always be the way that you think it is, because of how exactly it works, right? Because of how exploitative it is. And I will be explaining how exploitative it is within these next few minutes, but make sure you stay tuned, right? And like I said, please do feel free to share your thoughts, do feel free to share your ideas and whatever it is that you have to share with me, because I would absolutely love to hear what you have to say, right? Don't forget to do that. I really, really want to know what you're thinking. And don't forget to, go download our app also, which you can find on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. That way you can actually stay tuned to this conversation from anywhere in the world at any time of the day. And something else that you can actually do is to make sure that you go follow us on our socials. That way you can stay updated, you can stay informed about everything that happens, and it will definitely help you understand and be aware and share all these new information, these news with your friends as well. And especially in this day and age, you need to make sure that you're aware about everything that happens. So make sure you stay tuned, okay? And make sure you go follow us on our socials and download our app, and you get in touch with me, because I really, really want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what you feel, and I want to know what your thoughts are as well. So don't forget to do that. But let's actually, get back into our conversation, because we were talking about how, even though the fashion industry seems all diverse and inclusive with a lot of representation, it might not necessarily be that way, right? So going back to Halima Aden, in fact, being the first model to wear a burkini in a Sports Illustrated cover, or in the Sports Illustrated magazine. This was in fact a huge win for her, right? And she said it's actually amazing when you consider the history of the burkini, right? Because in France and in a lot of other European countries, we've seen people banning it on public beaches, right? And they actually made quite the statement for it to be featured in Sports Illustrated, right? And it's quite ironic as well, because all of these countries that are very big on being liberal and making sure that women have rights and whatnot, especially in terms of Muslim women and the rights that they have in terms of wearing the hijab, the burkini, the niqab, and all the other head coverings and scarves that they have. They can in fact be very, very restrictive about it, right? And especially with this banning of headscarves by the EU and whatnot, all of that has in fact created a lot of controversy. There is a lot of debate, a heated debate, I might add, actually, with regard to choice, with regard to why we try to police the choices, police the choices of women and the choices they make. So obviously, those are in fact very important conversations to be having. And especially in a time like this, when things like the burkini, things like the niqab, things like the hijab are being banned, it was huge, and they made quite the statement when they actually had Halima Aden wear a burkini in the Sports Illustrated, right? And what she said was that they pushed the needle, right? And despite it making a statement, she said that the experience wasn't all positive, right? And she felt like she constantly had a thin line that she had to walk, because she was upsetting some members of the Muslim community, right? And that is another important conversation that we're going to be having as well. But don't worry, make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're actually going to head into a small break, and after that we will be back to keep talking to you about, the burkini, about how Halima Aden quit the fashion industry, and why exactly she had to quit the fashion industry. So until then, make sure you stay tuned.
Cycling in London is not child's play. How to be a better cyclist? Listen to my show, only on Relaks Radio. I'm Kevin. Join me every Thursday, 5 p.m. Look forward to seeing you.
Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now I'm super excited to be here because it's, we're still important and interesting conversation about the fashion industry, and how the fashion industry, even though it is inclusive and it has a lot of representation and diversity, even though that's a case that might that despite all of that being there, that it is still exploitative in terms of young girls who are in the industry, in terms of all these young girls who are trying to build a career for themselves, and how that has actually made the fashion industry very exploitative. So that is what we're talking about, and we were talking about the story of Halima Aden and why she actually quit the fashion industry. Now make sure you stay tuned, because we still have a little bit left to carry on with this conversation. And obviously, until then, until we finish the conversation, make sure you stay tuned, but also make sure you stay tuned all the way until 9 a.m., because I do have a lot of interesting things to say. I do have a lot of interesting conversation to be having with you, and I love to keep you company, so make sure you do that. Okay, and don't forget to download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. You can download the app. You can in fact join this conversation live as well. All you need to do is just text me on 0785 and that way you can actually be a part of this conversation. So don't forget to do that, and don't forget to go download or rather go follow us on social media as well, right? So let's actually get back into the conversation where we were talking about Halima Aden and the sort of changes that she has had to make. Right now, like I said, she was in fact the first model to model a burkini, and that was huge. That was monumental, that was phenomenal in terms of representation for hijab wearing models, because she paved the way for a lot of these women to actually pursue their fashion careers. And having said that, despite all of that, the fashion industry, despite her having representation for the Muslim community, there was a lot of backlash that she had to face as well. Because the support and the responses that she got wasn't, in fact, all that positive, right? There was, in fact, a lot of negative experience as well. So we will be talking about all of that. Now, if you have any thoughts, if you have anything that you want to share with me, make sure you get in touch with me. All you need to do is just text me on 07852473473 and get in touch with me, because I would absolutely love to hear what you have to say. Okay. Now, after this whole shoot that was done, she would always hear comments like, this burkini is way too form fitting, and why would you shoot for a publication like that? And she felt like she was constantly trying to appease her Muslim fans, but also, trying to keep it very fashionable. And because there were like so many young fans were messaging her and saying, we want to see you in new looks, we want to see your scarf tied differently. And with all of that, with all of that message and all those messages she was receiving, it was very hard to appease her fans, right? Because in one way, they wanted her to make sure that whatever she wore wasn't too form fitting, or it wasn't too revealing, obviously. And she felt like she had to constantly fight this battle between trying to appease her Muslim fans and being very fashionable, right? Because she would always get comments like, why are you wearing something that is so tight? Like, why is it so form fitting? And why are you wearing your scarf like that? Why would you model for a publication like that? So she did have to face a lot of backlash. And she said that at one point it really, really got to her, right? And she says that she also felt great pressure being the first hijab wearing Muslim model in the industry. And she also felt a sense of responsibility to the girls that were coming after her. So, for all the girls that were actually coming after her, she felt this sense of responsibility because she was under a lot of pressure for being the first, hijab wearing Muslim model in the industry. And she had to sort of, make sure she set the correct standards, make sure that she had certain standards set, because if not, when other Muslim models came into the industry, it would be very, very hard for them to go forward, for them to move forward, and for them to actually become models themselves, right? And she also said that she felt like that everyone deserves representation, and regardless of regardless of the community you're from, regardless of who you model with, that you still deserve representation. And she felt like she didn't have that, right? And she never got to flip through a magazine and see somebody who looks like her. And Lizeth, who's actually her best friend, digs out the latest issue of the Essence magazine, Aden proud in pink in the cover. Okay, so Aden actually takes it from her somewhat wonderingly, because she says sometimes it's very, very wild for her. She says, she still catches herself because when her friend went and got that from the newsstand, she was like, oh my gosh, this is really me. Am I the one who's on this cover? Like, it's really me, right? And she also said that she faced a lot of criticism by the members of the Muslim community because they saw it as a haram, right? Because they saw modeling as haram, and it's in fact forbidden by the Islamic law. So she said that it was very, very scary to in fact put herself out there, because she didn't know if she would get backlash or how bad it was going to be, right? And I think that's a very huge problem that a lot of hijab wearing models would face in the future as well. A lot of backlash from the community because of the fact that modeling is considered haram, right? And because sometimes the support, sometimes the comments and the experience that you have from it isn't always positive. And obviously, at one point it starts getting to you as well. So obviously then you need to think about, is it really good for my mental health? Do I have to keep doing this because of all the backlash that I am getting, right? Now, 2 days before the pageant, Aiden almost pulled out, and she told the newspaper at that time, you don't let being the first to do it stop you, right? Because obviously the fact of the matter is she was under a lot of pressure. She was in fact the first hijab wearing model, so she had to make sure that she appeased her Muslim fans, she appeased her community, but also that she was very fashionable. And she constantly felt like she had to battle between these two things. She had to battle between what exactly she felt like doing and what exactly her fans wanted her to be. So because she constantly had to battle these things, it was very, very hard for her. But however, being in that industry for so long, being in that being in the industry for so long, being a model for so long, and still finding out that regardless of everything, regardless of representation, that it still can be exploitative, must be very, very disheartening. And I think that's a very huge problem that a lot of and I can't even begin to fight, because after thinking that the fashion industry might actually be capable of change, and then you eventually finding out, look, it's not really capable of change because they are a certain way and they won't really change. It must be heartbreaking, because if it's something that you work so hard for, if it's something that you put so much effort into, then that's definitely not the happiest or the most positive of feelings, right? So make sure you stay tuned, because I will be back in a few minutes to talk to you about why you need to mend your clothes and do yourself some good. Okay, until then, make sure you stay tuned, because I will be back